Welcome back to part 2 of our Atlantic Adventures Collection virtual familiarisation visit of Plymouth and Liverpool. My name's Jo Butler and I'm the tourism lead for this Interreg project for Visit Plymouth. I hope you all had a good lunch break. I'm delighted to introduce you all to James Wood from Visit Liverpool. We're looking forward to hearing your presentation, and please do drop any questions into the chat box, and we will be having a nice chat with James and his colleagues after his presentation. Thank you. Over to you, James.
Well, hello everybody, and greetings from Liverpool today. I also have a few colleagues with me as well, so we hope to be chatting with you later on as well. So I've put together 3 presentations for you, and the first one is of the theme of military and fortification. And I'm hoping that, that what I put in here will give you some insights into some great things to see and do in Liverpool. So if we can have the next slide, please. So, as you might already know, Liverpool is a city that's rich in maritime history. Its strategic position in the northwest of England, facing out to the Atlantic and US, was very important and highly significant. Liverpool has played its part in various military conflicts, notably in World War II. And Liverpool was also a key target. And in the Second World War, it had the second worst bombing in the UK, only behind London, reaching its peak in May 1941. Next slide, please. So I've put together these different things for you to see and do. I'm going to start off with the Merseyside Maritime Museum. I think this is really central for Liverpool's military history, and there's some great things to see in here as well. It explores Liverpool's historic seafaring past, and there are lots of different floors full of plenty of things to see and do. It's really interesting. One thing I've picked out here is the exhibition. It's all about the Lusitania. It's called Lusitania Life, Loss and Legacy. And it's a major exhibition that opened back in 2015 on the 100th year anniversary of the tragic sinking of the Cunard Lusitania cruise liner. The sinking occurred in May 1915 during the First World War, and it was actually sunk by a German submarine. It sank off island, and it unfortunately killed over 1,000 people. And it was this event that actually brought the US into the First World War. The exhibition also highlights new research about people involved within the Lusitania story, as well as the role Liverpool cruise liners had within the First World War. There's plenty of other content within the Maritime Museum about the First World War as well, so I would recommend going to see it. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so this very modern building, which sits on Liverpool's waterfront, is called the Museum of Liverpool. It really is stunning, both externally and internally. But this houses some great content as well, which you might be interested in. So being a large maritime port, Liverpool really was a key target for German bombing raids during the Second World War. And the bombing of the city was really bad, causing huge damage throughout the city. And also the surrounding residential areas. There's a great exhibition in here, which is actually one of my favourites, which is called Blitzed Liverpool Lives. This exhibition is a very personal exhibition, and it shares the images and stories from locals showing the devastation that was inflicted during those 7 days. Can we have the next image, please? And as you can see here, there is plenty of other content within the Museum of Liverpool as well. So there is content for the First World War as well. And again, these are very personal stories that have been brought to life through the curators at the Museum of Liverpool. Next slide, please. So this rather impressive building, it's called Martin's Bank Building. And many people have walked past this on their daily commute or whatever, and they don't really realise what's actually gone on within this building. So in May 1940, when the country was threatened with German invasion, the British government decided to transfer all the UK's gold reserves up to Liverpool, and they were stored in the basement of this bank. So this is quite an interesting fact. And the whole operation was part of a wider operation, which would evacuate British wealth to Canada, fish. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so this looks like it's out of a film. This is called Western Approaches. And deep beneath the city streets, groups have the opportunity to experience this top secret war bunker. And it once played a pivotal role in the Battle of the Atlantic. And it's a great place to visit. It's very authentic, with various different rooms that are all quite the same as they were back in 1940. This bunker was used to protect the tactics and secrets of the British armed forces as they fought to protect Britain's sea supply routes and aid the Allied victory. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so this rather colourful vessel is the famous Mersey Ferry. Now, the Mersey Ferry is iconic to Liverpool, and it's actually been operating since around the early 13th century, so it's been going for a long time. And in the background here, you can see Liverpool's famous waterfront as well, with the Liver Building, Cunard Building, and Port of Liverpool buildings. Now, Mersey ferries operate several different tours, and groups can experience one of these, which is called the River Explorer Cruise. It lasts around 50 minutes, and it travels up and down the River Mersey, which is really interesting, and it tells you all about the history of the city and its famous waterfront. What is also interesting is that there are other packages which Mersey ferries have, which link up with other attractions in the city. So you can actually purchase joint ticketing for things like Liverpool Cathedral and Liverpool FC. Now you'll notice that this ferry is very colourfully painted. So anyone who's got an interest in the First World War might recognise what's going on here. So the actual painting on it was actually designed by Sir Peter Blake, who was actually famous for painting the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album cover. And this was done as part of Liverpool's First World War commemorations. And the unique dazzle design takes inspiration from the patterns that were used on vessels in World War I, which used eye-catching shapes and colours to baffle the eye, making ships difficult to target. So this is our very colourful take on that. Next slide, please. So this is a German U-boat. And here you can step aboard one of only 4 that are actually still surviving in the world today. This particular one was raised from the seabed in 1993, and you can visit it on the Wirral at Woodside. It actually links up with the Mersey Ferry as well, so it's very convenient. Groups can experience this and to see what life was like on board during wartime. There's an interactive audiovisual experience which explains the mysterious story of this particular German U-boat, which very strangely refused to surrender. Next image, please. And here you can see what the rest of the attraction actually looks like. So you can actually go inside and see what it was actually like. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a very pleasant summary image. You can see we've got Liverpool right across that water, which is the River Mersey. To the left, you have New Brighton Lighthouse, and to the right, that large sandstone building is actually called Fort Perch. Now, this was built in the 1820s, and it was built to protect Liverpool from the potential French invasions during the Napoleonic Wars. So it's still there, standing proud. It's actually now privately owned and can be viewed from New Brighton Promenade. Next slide, please. So I'm hoping I've given you some good ideas there on things to see and do. But obviously, when you do come to Liverpool, we'd really like you to stay. So we've got plenty of accommodation options. In fact, we've got probably about 8,000 rooms within the city. And the two hotels that I picked out here are two really nice ones. So the one on the left is the Hilton Hotel, which actually overlooks the Royal Albert Dock. And on the right-hand side, we've got a room from the lovely Pullman Hotel, which is actually right on the waterfront. Next slide, please. Now, those of you who have been to Liverpool will know that it's famous. It's actually legendary for its nightlife. So I've included some great options here for dining and nighttime. So for dining, you've got places like Pilgrim, which is part of the Duke Street dining experience. There's lots of great places to eat in Liverpool. And being a real sort of world-class city, there are menus from all over the world. And as I said, you know, the nightlife experience is actually really unique. And we have places like the Cavern, which are absolutely fantastic to visit as part of your visit to make it really memorable. Next slide, please. Okay, so Liverpool is actually really easy to get to. So within 45 minutes of Liverpool city centre, we have two international airports. One is Liverpool John Lennon Airport and one is Manchester Airport. Liverpool's also really easy to get to by train. So from London, it takes just over 2 hours, and from Manchester, about 35 minutes. Liverpool is also really accessible by ferry, and there are great links to both Dublin and Belfast with different ferry operators. And also don't forget that Liverpool has its own cruise ship terminal, which in the last few years has absolutely come to life and is welcoming cruise ships from all over the world. Next slide, please. Okay, so that is the end of my military presentation. So I hope you found it interesting. Anyone who's got any inquiries, you can contact us through our email, which is listed there. And then we also have our website as well. We will also be fielding questions later on as well. So we'd like to hear from you. Thank you. Hi there, everyone. Nice to see you again. Okay, so my second presentation is looking at the industrial connections. And I've put together a range of attractions and things to see and do that represent our industrial offering. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so Liverpool actually has a huge connection with industry. First of all, the port was actually a major shipping port and really, you know, worked very hard during that sort of industrial revolution period. So, you know, we had things like the Manchester Ship Canal, which was built, all the trading that was done between Liverpool and the world. You know, so many goods were brought into Liverpool and also, you know, taken out of Liverpool to be exported. At one point, Liverpool was actually the second most important city in the British Empire. And this was down to the huge impact it had on the shipping. Next slide, please. So I think a good place to start talking about Liverpool's industrial heritage is actually the Royal Albert Dock. And here you can see it. So it's an absolutely fantastic building. And when it was built, it was an absolute architectural triumph. It actually opened in 1846, and it was the first structure in Britain to be built from cast iron, brick and stone. And now it's actually the largest collection of Grade 1 listed buildings in the UK. By the late 19th century, 40% of the world's trade was actually passing through Liverpool's docks. 2 years after the Royal Albert Dock opened, it was then modified to feature the world's first hydraulic crane. So this sort of shows the real importance of the Albert Dock. It was also popular to store valuable cargoes like brandy, cotton, tea, silk, tobacco, ivory. So again, really important. Can we just go on to the next slide, please? So this is like more of an overhead view. And this, I think, really takes into consideration the way that the Albert Dock is now. It's actually, you know, our most visited tourist attraction in the city. And those warehouses are now home to an amazing range of world-class museums, art galleries, attractions, hotels, and some of the city's finest independent shops as well. So here you have the likes of Tate Liverpool, the Merseyside Maritime Museum, the Beatles Story. It really is a great hub for tourists to go to. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're back at the Museum of Liverpool, which I mentioned earlier. Just to go into a bit more detail about this, the Museum of Liverpool is an absolutely fantastic museum, and it was the world's first national museum devoted to the history of a regional city, and the largest newly built national museum in Britain for more than a century. It's a great place to learn more about Liverpool's industrial, trading and social history, and what it really means to be a Liverpudlian. This image here actually shows a recreation of court housing, and court housing was actually developed for Liverpool residents, for them to live in during those industrial times. Obviously not a great place, but by visiting the Museum of Liverpool, you can actually see what it must have been like for those people living there. Next slide, please. Okay, so from industrial Liverpool, we go over the River Mersey to a beautiful village, which is called Port Sunlight Village. So this really is a historical time capsule in my view. The village was actually built in the 19th century by an industrialist called William Hesketh Lever, and it was built to house his workers at his Sunlight soap factory. This was a world first. Can we have the next slide, please? So these are actually the workers' cottages, which are beautifully preserved. The soap which was made here was actually exported all over the world, and this was the beginning of the huge Lever empire, which I'm sure you've all heard about. Next slide, please. And the village features a range of attractions, including the award-winning Port Sunlight Museum and the recently restored Edwardian Workers' Cottage. And also the Lady Lever Art Gallery. This is actually one of my favourites, and this was built by Lord Lever for his wife, and it actually houses magnificent art treasures from all over the world, which they actually collected, and now it's all on show for the public. Next slide, please. Okay, so the Mersey Ferry again with the Liverpool waterfront in the background. The reason I've put this in again is because it's very fitting for an industrial themed itinerary. Mersey ferries actually have created the Manchester Ship Canal cruise, and this is a great way to learn about the industrial connections between Liverpool and Manchester. So the tour lasts actually about 6 hours. It takes in a 35-mile journey, and it really is a real sight to behold. The Manchester Ship Canal actually opened in 1894, and it was built to transport goods like cotton through to the city of Manchester, really to help avoid paying the huge taxes that Liverpool's port owners had. It actually took around 6 years to build the canal at a cost of £1.6 billion in today's money, so a huge undertaking. Next image, please. So the cruise takes in spectacular scenery along the 35-mile journey, and it will leave you with an awe-inspiring sense of how the canal helped shape Manchester and Liverpool and influence the Industrial Revolution. Next slide, please. And finally, I've decided to put in the world of glass. So just outside Liverpool, there is a town called St. Helens. And this is a really interesting place to go to. So St. Helens is home to glassmaking. And here, this is actually still made today. And the whole heritage of St. Helens glass is actually revealed within the World of Glass Museum. Next image, please. The museum has two great galleries to explore. The Glass Roots Gallery, which explains the history of glass and its important role in everyday life, with artifacts dating back to ancient Egypt. And also it has the Earth to Light Gallery, which tells the story of what made St. Helens great from its humble beginnings to its rise as a world leader in glassmaking. So definitely well worth a visit. Next slide, please. So I put in a couple of more accommodation options here for you. And here, these have both got industrial themes. So on the left-hand side, we've got the Titanic Hotel. So this is actually built in what was a former warehouse, which used to house rum and tobacco. And now it literally is Titanic, because everything in it is huge, including the rooms. Very popular with tourists. On the right-hand side, this beautiful building is actually the Liverpool Hotel, and this is in the middle of Port Sunlight Village, which I was just talking about earlier. And this actually used to be the hospital in the village, and it's been repurposed. So two great places to stay. Next slide, please. So in keeping with Liverpool, I've included a really good restaurant here, which is called Fazenda, which is like a sort of Brazilian, Argentinian themed restaurant. This is just one of many different types of restaurants of world cuisine, which we have in the city. And on the right-hand side, this is a fantastic place to visit. So this is called Panoramic 34. This restaurant is on the 34th floor of the West Tower building. And as you can see, it commands unrivaled views across the city, over the River Mersey, and on a clear day, the mountains of North Wales can be seen as well. So a great place to view all the places that you've seen during your visit. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, here are the journey times into Liverpool, which we covered earlier. Next slide, please. Okay, so thank you again. And again, you know, if you have any inquiries, please do use our travel trade email address or visit our website, visitliverpool.com. Thank you.
Thank you, James, very much. Wow. A lot of heritage, a lot of tourism experience there for the tour operators and groups to come and visit. Just one question for you, James, before we go into the Q&A session, putting you on the spot now. As a first-time visitor to Liverpool, what would you suggest as the top or maybe the three things you should see as a new visitor to Liverpool to sort of get a real feel for the vast amount of heritage that's on offer in the city?
Okay, gosh. Well, that you have put me on the spot because there is a lot to choose from. But I think I'd probably start off with going for one of our city tour buses. So this is a great way to actually capture lots of places to see and things to see and do. So, for instance, you can get on the bus down at the pier head, and it will take you around the whole city. You can see, you know, some of the amazing museums, art galleries, civic buildings. And then after the tour, you can then decide on which ones you want to visit, and, you know, take a bit more time, you know, to go and look at them. I think secondly, I'd like to pick St. George's Hall as well. So this is a fantastic building, which is very close to my heart because when I was a student, I was actually a tour guide here for like a summer holiday, so I know it inside out, and it is amazing. So it's such a great building that Queen Victoria actually said it was worthy of ancient Athens. So you can't really get better than that, can you? And you know, in sort of more recent times, its sort of prominence has been brought to life again because Liverpool is now a very famous city for filming. So it's actually been used recently for the new Batman film, and also the Harry Potter films as well, to name a few. So lots to see there. And then I think third, I'd probably say to head down to the pier head down on Liverpool's waterfront, because as you saw in those pictures, we have those three amazing buildings. So we have the Liver building, the Cunard building, and the Port of Liverpool building, and they're all next to each other. And we call those the three graces. You know, they are very close to every person's heart in Liverpool, and each has a great story to tell. So definitely worth you know, so looking into those. You know, so you have the Liver building, you know, which is, you know, just fantastic. Has a great tour in there as well, and it's topped off by the two mythical Liver birds. Then next to that, you have the Cunard building, which obviously used to be the head office for the Cunard shipping line. Lots of history there. And then next door to that, you have Liverpool's Port of Liverpool building, which is spectacular and just shows the wealth that Liverpool had during those fantastic years. So I think those would be my three top tips, Joe. But obviously, you know, there's lots more to choose on the Visit Liverpool website as well.
Lovely. Thank you, James. So we could personally book you for one of those tours then, by the sounds of it. That sounds fantastic.
Absolutely,
okay,
that's no problem.
Marvellous. Thank you, James. So back over to you now for your final presentation for maritime heritage.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So yeah, this is my third and final presentation, which really looks at exploring, you know, the spirit of discovery. You know, so again, you know, there's some really good things to see and do here, which I've picked out. So if we can just whiz on to the next slide, please. Okay, so I can't actually read that because it's gone pixelated. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is absolutely fascinating. So this is actually Liverpool's old dock. Now, this old dock was actually built in 1715, and it was the first ever commercial wet dock. And it was actually originally known as Thomas Steers Dock. And when Liverpool was undergoing its transformation around sort of 2006, 2008, they were starting to build the new Liverpool One shopping complex. And lo and behold, during the excavations, they actually found this, the old dock. So it's actually been preserved, and there is now a tour where you can actually go and learn all about it and the significance and impact that it made on the city and the world. So the tours can be booked through the Maritime Museum, and the tours last about 1 hour. Highly recommended. Next slide, please. Okay, so set within the Merseyside Maritime Museum, Liverpool has the International Slavery Museum. Now, this really is so worthwhile going to visit. It's on the third floor in the Maritime Museum. And as I understand it, the museum is the only one of its kind in the world. And it looks at all aspects of historical and contemporary slavery. Visitors are taken on a thought-provoking and moving journey behind, you know, the life of slaves, right the way from, you know, from where they were living in West Africa, you know, before slavery, through to the legacy of slavery, racism and discrimination. And it also explores, of course, Liverpool's connections with the slave trade. And, you know, because of this, it's just so popular with visitors from all over the world. So highly worthwhile visiting. Next slide, please. So yeah, and also just worth mentioning, across the city, that sort of legacy of Liverpool's connection with the slave trade can actually be seen. So Martin's Bank building, which I mentioned earlier, you can see these carvings within the walls. So these little hidden gems, sort of pop up all over the place, and by going on a walking tour or something like that, you can really discover something like this, which you probably wouldn't otherwise know about. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've headed back to the Merseyside Maritime Museum again, and this is a great exhibition. So this is called Titanic and Liverpool, The Untold Story. So for those of you that don't know, Liverpool has a great connection with the Titanic, and it really explores the city's central role in the whole Titanic story. The exhibition includes amazing exhibits, memoirs, stories about the crew and survivors. Many of the crew were actually from Liverpool as well, so very, very personal stories. And of course, for those of you who might already know, the famous White Star shipping line, who own the Titanic and several of the other amazing, transatlantic liners, has its head office in Liverpool. And that building is still in existence, and it's actually now a hotel called 30 James Street. So definitely worth a visit there as well. And because the Titanic was registered in Liverpool, well, then obviously the vessel actually carried the city's name on her stern as well, which you might have seen on photographs, etc. So next slide, please. So there are lots of things to see here as well. So this is a fantastic recreation of the Titanic as well. And, there's lots more to see in the Maritime Museum as well, which really sort of celebrates the golden age of the transatlantic liners. So definitely well worth a visit. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we are at the Royal Liver building. So again, just to say, this is, a really iconic Liverpool building on the waterfront. So I think this is one of the buildings which makes Liverpool one of the most iconic waterfronts in the world. And now this has actually been opened up in the last couple of years, and you can actually take a tour within here. It's fascinating. So the building was actually built in 1911, and it's now Grade 1 listed. Can we have the next image, please? So this is the start of the tour, which is in the basement, and this gives you like a unique insight into the building, why it was built, what the plans look like, stories about the people who built it. Great gift shop as well, by the way. And then from here, you then take the tour. Next slide, please. So when the Liver building was built in 1911, it was actually Europe's tallest building, which is quite hard to believe now. But when you actually take the tour, you end up in here, which is actually the clock tower. So that big clock face is actually right on the other side of that wall that we're looking at now. And within this clock tower, they now play an amazing 360-degree video for visitors, which actually tells the story of the city, everything from the beginning right through to present day. And it really is jaw-dropping. And I know many people, it's brought a tear to their eye when they've actually seen that. Next slide, please. So on top of the Liver building, you have the mythical Liver bird. So there's actually two. We've only got one of them in this picture, but this just gives you an idea of the whole scale. So on the tour, you can actually go outside and take some amazing photographs. And here we're overlooking Liverpool Bay, and you can see the cruise liner terminal just on the left-hand side there as well. And over on the far left, that's the Wirral, which is a fantastic place as well. Lots of things to see and do there. Next slide, please. Okay, so, a great way to bring the city to life, I think, is to take a walking tour. And Liverpool is actually a very compact city, so it's actually really easy to navigate on foot. So you don't have to get taxis everywhere. You can actually do it all on foot. It's great. And because of the concentration of attractions and great architecture, there's just something around every corner to see. And we have many fantastic tour guides in the city, and they're specialists in their field. So, we have themed tours covering things like maritime, architecture, history, food, music, of course, and the many hidden gems also. And I think they're really like a great way for visitors to really get under the skin of Liverpool as well. And you might even meet some of the friendly locals as well during one of these tours. Next slide, please. So for accommodation, I picked out two quite unique properties here, which I thought might be of interest. On the left-hand side, we've got the Beatles-themed Hard Day's Night Hotel. So this was opened in, I think it was 2008. Very popular with our international visitors. Beautiful rooms. It's even got a John Lennon suite as well with a white piano in it. And also it has a fantastic restaurant as well. On the right-hand side, we have what was Liverpool's first boutique hotel, which is called Hope Street Hotel. And this is in a former warehouse where they used to build carriages for horse and carriages. So lots of history in that building. And Hope Street has actually recently undergone a bit of a renovation with like fantastic balconies, which have like spa baths on, great views right over the city. And there's also a fantastic spa there as well. It's also in the heart of Liverpool's Georgian Quarter as well, which is definitely worth a walk around because the architecture is just so fantastic. Next slide, please. So for dining experiences, I brought in two of my favourites here. So on the left, this is the London Carriage Works, which is the sister restaurant to Hope Street Hotel. They do an absolutely amazing traditional English afternoon tea, which you can see there. So don't have any lunch if you do go on that. And then on the right-hand side, this is a sort of pirate / maritime themed restaurant called Smuggler's Cove. And this is located in the Royal Albert Dock. So just sort of continuing with that sort of maritime theme. So two nice options there. Next slide, please. Okay, and again, these are the journey times and ways to get into Liverpool, as we mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. That was my third and final presentation. Like I said before, please use our Travel Trade email address for any inquiries, and also please don't forget to visit our tourism website too. Thank you.
Thank you, James. That was really, really interesting. I'd like to welcome into our panel discussion now Jonathan from Mersey Ferries and Ian from the National Museums Liverpool. Hi, nice to meet you all. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We have had some questions coming in from operators. So the first one, I think over to you, Ian, if that's okay. The Old Docks tour, what sort of things do you see on this tour and what sort of duration does the tour last for?
Okay, Joe, thank you. The tour lasts for around an hour. It's taken by one of our visitor hosts at the museum, and you really get a sense of the Old Dock is kind of an origin story for Liverpool. In that the city exists because of the port, and the port exists because of the docks, and that Old Dock is really the kind of foundation of all of that. So you get to go below the kind of the street level surface, and you see the dock walls, the brickwork itself, and the kind of bedrock of the dock. So it's very literally you see the kind of the rock that the city and the port is built on in a way. the visitor hosts are really adept at, they understand that our visitors they're not maritime specialists by and large to the museum. So it's very much a general audience, and it's very much pitched towards somebody who may not know it, about the kind of the port and the city at all. So it's very much intended as an introduction to the world of maritime Liverpool, to the kind of 18th century shipping. There's a kind of a recreation on film down there of what the port would have looked like, or what the dock would have looked like back in the 1700s. So it gives you a sense of what the dock was like at the time. But it's also very kind of evocative to see, this kind of architecture in a city that kind of tends to build over its history a lot of the time, because it's an industrial commercial city. If something was out of date, it was just kind of knocked down, and you'd put something else in its place. So for the old dock to survive, it's I'm probably overstating it, and it always strikes me as somewhere much more like kind of Rome, or kind of a medieval sort of setting. It's something you don't really expect to see in the city, and there's something about seeing it below the surface which really kind of which brings that to life, I think.
Perfect, thank you. And just staying with you, Ian, what sort of bespoke products are on offer from the National Museums of Liverpool in terms of what can you offer groups and tour operators? Obviously, you've got the Old Docks tour, but are there other products as well that you can offer to tour operators?
There are, yeah. We host a number of activities across all of the venues. There's 7 venues within National Museums Liverpool, including the art galleries like the Walker and Lady Lever, and the Museum of Liverpool and Maritime Museum as well. At the moment, we're in a bit of a transition phase. We're trying to work out what we can do in terms of kind of COVID security and whatever. So we've been looking at tours around all of the venues. We can host kind of events at the venues as well, particularly at the Maritime Museum. So we're exploring ways to do that sort of safely and successfully within the kind of current restrictions. But there are kind of visitor host and host-led tours at all of the venues, and they're kind of things that we can offer in terms of alongside some of the kind of the learning and participation teams are great with kind of some of that first-hand experience as well of presenting to groups. So all of those things are sort of available for kind of schools and students, but also for kind of for other groups as well that visit the city. So we're still working our way through what we can and can't do at the moment in terms of the restrictions through COVID, but we're realizing more and more ways that we can particularly with book groups, that we can address those visitors to the city as well.
Perfect, thank you, Ian. And obviously with this sector as well, it's looking at bookings probably a little bit more later on in the year, maybe into 2022 as well. So it'll be exciting to hear what sort of products are coming out from you there. Over to you, Jonathan, if I can. Obviously through James's presentation, the artwork just looked fantastic on the Mersey Ferry there. Tell us more about the boat and what the tour can offer there as well, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jo. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, the Dazzle Ferry is one of the most colourful attractions within the city. It was actually painted back in 2015 and has been operating since then. As James mentioned in his presentation, it was actually designed by Sir Peter Blake, who painted the famous Beatles Sgt. Pepper album cover. And it's part of the First World War commemoration, and actually is sort of a camouflage type design with a pop art theme. It does have an onboard exhibition as well about Dazzle camouflage and how that was used in World War One. We are planning to use the Dazzle ferry as the main service vessel this year. We do actually have 2 ferries, one in traditional Mersey ferries colours and the Dazzle ferry as well. But we are planning, as I say, to use that as the main operating ferry during this year. The best way to experience it is to take a River Explorer cruise, which we operate all year long. 50-minute river cruise operating from the pier head. There is a recorded commentary giving you all the history about Mersey ferries and what you see from the cruise. The other thing just to mention as well is it's really the best way, I would say, to see the fantastic UNESCO World Heritage waterfront. It just gives you that perspective um, from the river. So I really encourage people to do that. Very easy to say to just to slot that into an itinerary. As I say, about an hour in total. It's very, very close, connected to everything else. The Albert Dock is a very short walk away. So yeah, that's probably the best way to experience it.
Perfect. Thank you, Jonathan. So probably in terms of for a tour operator whose first time visit to Liverpool, probably taking the Mersey ferry would be a great way to introduce the heritage and what's on offer in Liverpool to the city as well, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. We get a lot of groups taking the trip. We have a designated group organizer you can contact. They will give you all the information, and you can make a reservation with us. So yeah, we're really geared up for groups. So please do contact us if you're interested in bringing a group on the Mersey ferry.
Perfect. Thank you, Jonathan. James, the questions come in for yourself. Does Liverpool have a city pass?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Very apt at the moment because we've been looking at developing one, and we've been working with a third party to actually produce one. So we're hoping that by the end of April this year, there will be a new Liverpool City Pass. So this will be available for consumers and the travel trade, and we will be promoting that very shortly, actually. So keep an eye out. I would recommend people to sign up to our travel trade e-newsletter as well, so they can be kept up to date with things like this. But once we are ready to go out to market with it, we will be sending something out to the press and also to our database. But it does include, all the hero tourism products in the city. So it's a great introduction for people, and will certainly make the city a lot more accessible to visitors as well.
Fantastic. Well, that's great news. Great news. And I suppose on the flip side to that, are there any major attractions in Liverpool that are free to get in? And is booking needed in advance to visit these attractions?
Okay.
Sorry, James,
so
that was over to you, that one.
Yeah, I guessed it was. Okay, so another really good question. So basically, regarding timing, I would say going forward, post-COVID, many of the attractions will actually be operating timed entry. So this is something that people do need to take into consideration, particularly the travel trade. Now, as situations change constantly, obviously those individual attractions will be the best people to actually find that information out from. So that's what I can say about that. And then, what was the other question?
Is booking in advance advised for the free entry major attractions?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. Yes. Certainly post-COVID. I think you also asked about what attractions were free and which were paid for. So
Yes,
the city's actually got, we've actually got lots and lots of free attractions in the city. We're actually really lucky. So many of the museums and art galleries are free to enter, which is just unbelievable. So some of those products that we've talked about today, like the Merseyside Maritime Museum, is free to go into, as are the other National Museums buildings too. Sometimes you will have to pay if there is a special art exhibition on, or special event. Then there will be a charge for that, which I think is quite reasonable. But yeah, I think as a city we do very well for free attractions. The paid for ones, the likes of obviously Mersey Ferry, we just heard from there. That's paid for. Also the special exhibitions at Tate Liverpool. And some of the sort of music venues like the Beatles Store, etc., they're all paid for as well. But again, on Visit Liverpool, we've got all the information on there on what's free, what's paid for. In fact, I think we've actually got a blog on there about what you can do in Liverpool for free. So it's literally all on there in black and white for you.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you, James. And just one final question to both Ian and Jonathan. Is there anything you wanted to add additional to update the travel trade who are listening today about what's going on in your venues, maybe going forward or for next year? So over to you, Ian.
Thank you. Cheers, Joe. There's a number of kind of exhibitions in planning across National Museums Liverpool. World Museum has a kind of forthcoming exhibition on AI, artificial intelligence, which is very different to anything we've done previously. There's a kind of a revamp of a gallery called Wondrous Place down at the Museum of Liverpool as well, which is it's very much the kind of culture gallery in terms of music, sport, the culture of the city. So that's something that will open towards the end of this year, and I think we'll it was a good gallery to start with, and I think it'll really have its sort of its sense lifted at the moment. Walker Art Gallery's got the kind of John Moore's exhibition currently at the moment, but has a sort of a regular kind of renovation of its galleries as well, including I think it's Renaissance Revisited. So some of those galleries are being worked on as we speak. I'll just say the Maritime Museum opened a new gallery last year, but as it did so with perfect timing shortly before we shut down, I'll still count it as a new gallery. So that's one called Life on Board, which is probably the biggest thing we've done since the museum opened 30 years ago. And that looks at the kind of seafaring life, culture and work of sailors and seafarers from Liverpool and beyond. So there's a lot of new and constant development at the museums. I think that's a kind of key element of what we do.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you for that, Ian. Same question to you, Jonathan.
Yeah, just to mention a couple of other additional products which James mentioned. Firstly is the Manchester Ship Canal cruise, really popular cruise for groups. Sails from Liverpool into the Manchester Ship Canal and then back to Liverpool on the same day. About a 6-hour cruise. Details of that cruise are available on the Mersey Fraser website. If you click onto the trade section, all the details are there. We've also got the 2022 dates on that section as well, and we're hoping to be able to operate from July this year those particular trips. And then just finally, we've also got a new product, which is the Liverpool Bay Cruise, and these are 3-hour sightseeing cruises that go out past the mouth of the river and into Liverpool Bay. Again, we think will be very popular with groups. And there's dates for 2021 and 2022 available. Please again go onto the Mersey Fraser website, merseyfraser.co.uk, and have a look at the trade section. All the details are there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for your time today, and that's been really useful finding out all about the heritage and the amazing experiences on offer in Liverpool. So if any of our tour operators or travel trade have had additional questions for you, you will be available in the networking opportunities or on the virtual booths following this. So thank you for your time today, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.